Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. This one on the Libra new moon of the 6th of October 2022. Now I'm going to focus on this event based on Greenwich, so that's 12:05 and 14 seconds Universal Central Time. And if you're based in a different location to me, please see on the screen now and you can see where the event occurs. But it is all on the 6th across the globe today. Now, how I'm going to structure this presentation is first of all discuss what a Libra new moon represents. I'm then going to do that deep dive and share with you the event chart wheel, because there's some very complex but powerful and potent and potentially quite robust and eruptive energies manifesting in this particular new moon. But there are also some great opportunities. I'm then going to go on to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs and to describe what the next month will hold for your sign based on the sun or the ascendant, whichever you choose. So please stay with me for that. So what is a Libra new moon about? What is the sign of Libra about? Well, you probably know that it is a lot to do with relating and diplomacy. But it's a cardinal sign, so when Libra's roused, it can be very, very much more direct and action orientated. This is a sign that's ruled by the rather diplomatic energies of Venus. So it's very much about attracting good things to us, trying to find harmony. But it isn't just about relationships, because Libra is very much linked to aesthetics, taste, fashion, presentation. And every zodiac sign has its higher calling, but perhaps also its lower manifestations. And the higher calling of Libra is definitely trying to find those points of mutual interest. Even if we don't always necessarily agree on everything, we can agree to disagree. So that's very Libran. And there is the opportunity to work constructively with others. It doesn't mean to say that we have to lose our identity. But for Libran people generally, there can be a little bit of a tendency, particularly if people have more than just the sun or the ascendant, to have other planets in Libra or other planets in the 7th house in their natal horoscope, of trying too hard or doing too much for others. Now also, the lower side of the spectrum of this sign can be superficiality. Not necessarily engaging with people because they don't look right. Their appearance isn't quite good enough to be associated with. So there is that to it too. It's quite complex. Like all zodiac signs, it has a plethora of different attributes, qualities, but also counter qualities too. So the new moon is an opportunity for us to think about relationships. And over the next month, if we can think about all sorts of relationships, I don't just mean of an intensely personal or romantic kind, whether it's with people that we just encounter at work or in the streets, with our neighbours, our siblings, or whoever else. Finding an accord is something that's very much to celebrate. And I think that's really what this new moon would ordinarily give us the opportunity to do. Now, before I go into that deeper analysis, if you're new to me on my channel, I'd be honoured if you'd subscribe. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol, because every time I share a video, you'll get an alert. Also, if you'd like to get your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, please see the subscription link underneath this video. I've written these for over 25 years. And I think that makes me a bit unique amongst YouTube astrologers, and I write for some of the biggest websites, psychic websites around the world, and also Britain's leading daily newspaper in terms of readership, the Metro. So please join me. And also, with year 2022 racing up, if you want to order your forecasts for next year now, you can get the rest of this year free, plus a character analysis, plus 30% off, and it's all based on your time, date and place of birth. Totally individual to you, gives you searing insights to the opportunities ahead, and also how you might steer clear of some pitfalls. Please see the link to order beneath this video too. So now, beginning that deep dive, you can see on the screen the event chart. And the Sun and the Moon are together in Libra at 13 degrees 24 minutes and also 14 seconds. And just to the side of them, you can see there is Mars. Now this is particularly significant because Mars governs the opposite sign to Libra of Aries, which of course is the first zodiac sign. So Mars is rebel rousing energies. It's desire to get stuck in, initiate, but also desire instant gratification. So the impatience, the fighting spirit of Mars is wonderful for Aries because it gets us going. But in the sector of relating, it is very complex. Not least, it's in detriment. So this stability means that we mustn't rush how we go about relating to others. And because Mars, the Moon, and the Sun are very close to the fixed star Algo Rab, which can be quite destructive, we need to approach all types of relationships with additional care. Especially, of course, is Mercury, still located, as you can see on the screen, in the sign of Libra, continues its retrograde, which goes on to the 18th, and it doesn't come out of shadow until the 3rd of November. So relating issues need care with the impatience of Mars in its least positive location in its journey through the zodiac, right next to the Moon, which can be quite a volatile mix, forging a tense 150 angle with Uranus, the planet of disruption and rebellion, in broadly the sector of everyday resources. So I would say in a close relationship, if you're in one, there could be points of difference between you and yours about issues of taste, consumption, basically consumer spending. So if you want to splash the cash and a partner is a bit more cautious, that could cause some tensions. But also in the wider world, there's going to be some situations, I feel, where the warmongering energies of Mars can cause some problems. And what the energy of Libra is ordinarily about is making sure the lines of communication stay open, that doors don't shut completely, that there's always some way that dialogue is going forwards. Because once doors shut completely closed, people get more frustrated, they feel more cheated and more angry, and that can cause frustration to spill over. So the diplomacy of Libra is really going to be tested by this event, I feel. It is the case, however, that Venus on my time is in the 12th house, and it's forging a beautiful sextile to Pluto in the second house of resources in terms of this chart. In terms of the wider perspective, Pluto's in the 8th house in Scorpio, Pluto in the 10th, very, very good for business. And because Mercury, despite its retrograde, is also continuing an excellent alliance with Jupiter, the planet of growth, I know that they are both in retrograde at the moment, but they go forwards on the 11th and the 18th of this month respectively. And I should just say Pluto also goes forwards later today. So that's something we can all celebrate. As October unfolds, a series of retrogrades starts to melt away. But I think if there has been situations where people or states, governments feel that other governments, states, people in our individual relationships haven't been listening to each other, there can be a much greater sense of frustration that could come to the fore over the next month. But as ever, when we have a challenging nativity, there are also fantastic opportunities to go about things in a different way. So we could use the robustness and the fieriness of Mars to be a little bit better at mounting a firmer defence. Some people do take liberties, and if you're a giver, a carer, someone who's very generous with your time, perhaps even your possessions, and other people just seem to always just take your good deeds for granted, then this can be an event when you push back. So the next month can see you being much more assertive. And I think that's what I've been encouraging Libra people to do, particularly over the last few years. You can see also that Mercury is broadly square Pluto on this chart. That is quite challenging because it means that despite the goodwill that Jupiter brings to Mercury, and despite the fact that there is a lovely angle between Venus and Pluto, and Neptune and Pluto, it just suggests that if we have to encounter someone in a more orthodox organisation and they're kind of laying down the law, and we've heard it all, we know where they're coming from. It could be a big corporation like a bank you have to ring up, or you have to ring through on an insurance claim, something like that. And the worst of it is that the phone doesn't get answered because there aren't enough people working on the phones. So by the time you get through as caller number 332, 6 hours later, you're steaming with the sense of injustice that this creates. So you could say that justice is a big theme of this particular new moon, but we can't expect instant justice on our terms, because Mars can be a might is right influence, and the square between Mercury and Pluto can also have elements of that in its nature too. So we're going to have to count to 10, perhaps even 15 or 20 in some of our interactions, but where people have been taking liberties, for sure push back, but where you need to work harder at your listening skills, or me too, and be much more committed to the process of finding those points of interest, celebrating the things we have in common rather than focusing on those things we don't. There's a lot of good that can come over the next month. Please stay with me for your Sun or Ascendant forecast, beginning with Aries. So for you, Aries, having your ruler right on this event is really quite fascinating. Now, in a natal horoscope, if someone has Mars on the 7th house, it can make relationships for that person quite difficult, because they can sort of be quite brittle and abrasive in the way they interact, when sometimes it's just better to sort of be diplomatic and very polite. But maybe you feel that you do need to be a little bit more honest about how you feel about certain situations, and Mars will certainly help you to push back and to be a bit more rugged in your approach to relationships. But I wouldn't push too hard, because if you do, something could really snap completely. So I think it is important to try and keep the diplomacy going, and when it comes to your business and financial situation, I think as long as you handle those relationship issues with a degree of decorum and deftness, something really good could shape up for you over the next month in terms of a job, a promotion, or some kind of financial improvement. So I hope that's really encouraging for you. Now, Taurus, obviously all this energy in the sign of Libra for you is the 6th house, very much to do with work, diet, nutrition, organisation, where we are invested in terms of sacrifice, doing things that help others, being of service, not servile. And so having Mars here could give you the spark, if you're a bit dissatisfied in a job, to actually do something about it. And because Venus, your ruler, because your sign is also governed by Venus, it's in such a beautiful link with Pluto. If you do want to link up and connect with people who will understand where you're coming from, and you are someone who's really interested in doing your best with your work, a new job opportunity could easily manifest itself over the next 4 weeks. But equally, you can use the spark of Mars to give yourself more motivation. So if you're like me, a born again couch potato, this can be your opportunity to leap off the couch, put on the trainers, and go for a good stiff walk, or go to the local pool if it's open now and have a swim. Or if you're a bit more, a bit more physical and adventurous, perhaps get down the gym and push some weights. This kind of stuff will be really good for you, particularly to burn off any frustration. And with Mercury in retrograde, there may have been 1 or 2 things that have niggled recently. Your nervous system may be a bit tense. Someone around you may have been a bit picky, brittle, a bit critical, and it may have been at work. And maybe Mars being in your 6th house will just give you the motivation to check out other opportunities. If you decide to stay where you are and things improve because it was just one of those, brief sticky patches, at least you will give yourself a sense of being in charge of your future prospects by checking out what else is out there. Now, Gemini, for you, a glorious set of influences in the 5th house, which is all about manifesting your talent. So having Mars here can give you more get up and go when it comes to self-belief. Also, if there's someone you really like, you're not going to be so minded to say, well, maybe the time's not right for me. Mars on this new moon gives you a lot of encouragement to step outside your comfort zone, and you can dazzle someone with your brightness, your personality, your charisma. Of course, Mercury retrograde generally doesn't help your sign or Virgos, also governed by Mercury, when it's retrograde. But equally, Mercury retrograde can be a time to remake, revisit, retrain, recalibrate. So something can be put to use from Mercury's retrograde. Don't see it as an entirely negative event. It simply isn't. But that tangle with Pluto suggests that you may not feel that creatively you're getting the money that you feel that you're due. I think that could be something that comes up for you. But if you want to step out on that new date or revitalise an existing love relationship or take an interest much more seriously, there's a lot of energy here to really push you forwards and in a quite galvanising and exciting way. So enjoy this opportunity. Now, Cancer, for you, of course, the 4th house, where all this action takes place, is about where you live. And having Mars in this location could give you the push to change something that doesn't feel right. So, if you are living somewhere that you don't feel that the vibe, the particular environment that you're ensconced in is quite what you want, then that sensory side of your nature is being asked to add to it the passion of Mars, which means doing something to change it. So I think that could mean that you're going to be much more proactive about improving where you're living, talking to people about your feelings. Sometimes you'll avoid conflict at all costs, but I think you could be more outspoken about your emotional point of view over the next month. And if that's the case, I think that can be broadly a very good thing. And with Venus in that quite beautiful link to Pluto, if there is a love relationship or a relationship in the family where you are happy and contented, there can just be a real sense of excitement about what's unfolding at this time, and things can move quite quickly with Mars so very close to this new moon. Now, Leo, from your perspective of the Sun or the Ascendant, this new moon event occurs in your 3rd house, which is about quick moving events. It's where we interact with people on a daily basis. It governs technology, text messages, instant messages, the way we think on our feet. But having Mercury, which governs that particular activity, that particular sector of activity, in retrograde, suggests that maybe there's some rethinking or recalibration going on around some of your ideas. But if that's the case, I think the main thing for you at this time is not to get too frustrated, because if you do, you could feel irritable, you may have an excess of nervous energy, you may find it difficult to sleep over the next month, particularly with Uranus, in your 10th house of work and how you connect with the wider world. So if you're doing a lot of thinking about how that's all going to change and shape up for you, it may be much more difficult to switch off. So one of the things that I would say to deal with this extra stimulation you're going to have is try to find some new engaging hobbies and interests which can take your mind off some of the more pressing and stressful strands that we all have in our situations. But there's still loads of opportunity. It may seem a strange thing to say, but if you get yourself a bike, whether it's an exercise bike, one to go around your locality, or you think even about a motorcycle, it wouldn't really be a surprise with Mars being so close to the moon and the sun in your 3rd solar house, in the moving the air sign of Libra, which is very much about finding balance, balance on a bike, but also get fitter, and some short bursts of energy can be very good for your cardiovascular system at the moment. And if you are feeling, you've got the odd headache here and there, that's a great diversion to try to change things. But with Mercury in a 10th right angle to Pluto, trying to work out exactly what you want to do may see you overloaded with too much stimulation. And so finding some peacefulness or burning off that excess energy are two great but rather diverse ways to deal with that energy. But this can be a time of a lot of discussion, a lot of thinking, and a lot of potential new strands developing for you. Now, Virgo, in your sun or ascendant, the position of the clump of planets, the stellium in Libra, is your second house. But of course, the second house is very much to do with the foundation of life. It's very Tauran, so it is potentially about money, but also self-worth. And if you feel that you don't really get your just rewards, especially for your talents, the fact that your ruler Mercury is in retrograde in this area, but tangling with Pluto in your 5th house of creativity, can give you, in a way, strangely, even though it's a 10th right angle, someone could say something that really irritates you, but it actually can give you the push to do something to change things, particularly with Mars in the mix. But it could also make you a bit more prickly or self-conscious if it seems that other people seem to do better than you. But that's where you've got to watch out about the superficiality that can be at the lower end of the feeling spectrum of the sign of Libra. So if you do go for a new financial opportunity or try to reconfigure the money or possessions that you have, do it in a way which stays in balance. Don't throw things out of balance too much, because with the 9th house position of Uranus, there is part of you at the moment that does want to be much more devil may care, which is brilliant. But your nature is innately cautious, shrewd, you check things, you're very precise, and I wouldn't, stop being like that completely, because that's not going to be helpful to you. So still go through the processes, but if you can find some new and imaginative way to generate some extra income with the help of Uranus, even if it means it puts you out a little bit, you have to do some research late at night when you're tired, or buy some products to test out to sell if you want to become a seller. And there may be a bit of an experimental period where you don't quite hit the sweet spot, but keep checking things out, because I think with Venus and Pluto in such a lovely alliance, your ability to reach people in some kind of way, quite subtly but very powerfully, is really enhanced quite strongly. Which brings us to Libra. And of course, this event is very much about your sign. And whether you're a sun sign, a Libra, ascendant, moon, you have other inner planets there, or you have a lot of 7th house, this is a very important event. If you have been joining me over the last 3 or 4 years, you know that I've been extolling you constantly through that time to just push back against the people who have really seriously been taking you for granted. Because Neptune's in your 6th house since 2012, the sacrificing part of your nature has really been very high, and that's been brilliant in a professional context. But if it's the family who always seem to sort of tell you about arrangements last, or assume that you're going to contribute to something where you're not involved in the initial discussion, or an arrangement is made for a family gathering and you're told after the event, or we'd really love you to be there, but it's rather wane because you only hear this an hour before the event begins. This kind of stuff, really, really unpleasant. And I think, judging by the people who write in to my YouTube channel, I constantly hit a chord with people about this. And the reason I understand it is because my ascendant is 23 degrees Libra. And so, essentially I'm a very Libran type of person. So if you do feel that, you need to push back, then do so. But with Uranus in the 8th house of big, deep transformations, just be aware that trying to do what you need to do for yourself, the individual, may receive criticism from others who feel that you're being too single-minded, particularly with Mars in the mix. But you know, sometimes we have to do what is right for us, and that does mean not being selfish, but just really focusing for that particular time until we get the strand, the project off the ground, or the thing that we've been working on for years, really get it moving at pace so it's sparkling with positivity and results. That requires great dedication. So Mars is really saying to you at the moment, show the dedication to what's important to you, and accept you could get some brickbats, particularly with Pluto squaring up Mercury in your sign, and particularly with Uranus in your 8th house. If you're trying to do something that's much more entrepreneurial, for example, the 8th house is where we're most devoted, but Uranus is where we want to be most free. So your devotion needs to be really meaningful to you. So if you're going through the motions in a relationship, which can be a bit of a Libran trait, because you don't want to upset the apple cart. In other words, you don't want to upset the balance of your own scales. So if you're playing safe, you're avoiding really confronting a situation that hasn't been quite right for quite some time. I think Mars is really pushing and provoking you to be much stronger and really have the courage to go for what is right for you. Which brings us to Scorpio, for the Sun or the Ascendant. All these planets in the sign of Libra are in your 12th house. But of course, Mars is your traditional ruler. The fact that you've got Venus in your sign, forging a beautiful link with Pluto, your modern higher octave ruler, is really lovely. It means that some very important conversations can take place at this time. But I think with Mercury squaring with Pluto, the potential, I'm going to use some words that are quite harsh, but the potential for some backstabbing is strong. So you're going to find out who really is in your corner just at this time. And if there are people who are not in your corner, you're going to find out in a big way. Because Mars conjunct the Moon and the Sun is very volatile, particularly with Uranus in your 7th house of relating. So some secrets can pour into the open. Now, you're a great one for keeping your cards close to your chest, not necessarily telling everyone everything that's on your mind. Sometimes you can be very direct and to the point in expressing an opinion about other people's situations. And remember, my overlay is, my ascendant overlay is mainly in Scorpio, so I can relate to that. But I think there is some tender stuff going on to do with your past, to do with drawing things together, putting things to bed, you know, bringing a sense of closure and peace. But if you're still activated by an injustice that's happened in your past, you may not be ready to do that, and you may want to hold the perpetrator to account. Well, that's fine, but of course the problem with anger is that anger and bitterness towards people, it just creates an energy inside of ourselves. And that's one of the things that I've learned as I've got older and older. It's, you know, it's sometimes we can be perfectly justified to have a particular emotion, but it can also impact on ourselves. So very difficult sometimes to let go, but I think you are being encouraged on the less grievous stuff, you know, the stuff that's not really key. Try and let some of those past injustices just float away into the ether. And if there are some more serious ones that you do need to think about very carefully, perhaps even seek legal recourse if someone has manifested upon you an act of cruelty or physical hurt or sexual impropriety, you could well consider bringing this matter into the open over the next month. If, however, you can find that peacefulness, just moving into your own space, finding some time for yourself. But Mars in the 12th house is a pretty turbulent old influence, especially in that angle to Uranus. So I think it's around relationships. Your sense of injustice might burn most hotly over the next month, and that could see you tempted to bring a particular tie to a close if you feel it has got absolutely no future. But it also could, there are potentials for healing in this chart. And so just consider that carefully. Which brings us to Sagittarius. And on your particular prospect, Sagittarius, for the Sun or the Ascendant of my particular event chart is based on your sign, and it's also conjunct the part of fortune. Great start. You also have that collection of energy in your sector of sociability. Wonderful. Mars, which is a planet that governs your second decan, is also very close, of course, to the main event. But Mars in your 11th house is an interesting influence because it can be less needing of personal individual attention. So it can be a bit more democratic. It can be where we want to be ourselves, but also it helps us to find points of networking and points of collaboration and cooperation with others, which of course is very Libran energy. So I think your friendship situation can really pick up over the next month. And if you have been marooned inside because of COVID, Mars being in that location can push you to go out again. It's just that with Uranus in the mix, you can't completely forget about your responsibilities and obligations to others. 11th house energy is very similar to your own. It's very Aquarius, and like your sign, Aquarius and Sagittarius people really appreciate independence and freedom. So Uranus, the planet which governs the sign of Aquarius, that freedom is actually for you in a very practical workaday area, very much to do where you've got to get your head down and graft. So if you're doing a job which is dull, boring and predictable, and you'd rather be doing a job which is more the collective and working with others and sharing brilliant ideas and feeding into the future direction of humanity, then this particular new moon is a fantastic opportunity for you to take things forwards. It's just that with Mercury and Pluto in a square, just be aware of balance in the books. Also, Venus is in your 12th house, but in a beautiful link with Pluto. So Pluto has a more challenging but more positive link. So Venus in the 12th house, some money could come to you at this time, I feel, over the next month. But how this comes about could come as a big surprise. And that brings us to Capricorn, for the Sun or the Ascendant. Now for you, it's action-packed in your sector of success, but you have a real appreciation of working diligently, patiently, tenaciously towards your big targets and goals. And this is a chart which gives you a fantastic opportunity to have some big breakthroughs over the next month. Because perhaps if you are encountering a glass ceiling, you do need to be, I don't want to use the word forceful, but perhaps a little bit more rugged in your approach. So Mars can give you a bit more desire to seek opportunities and to seize the moment. Now, it is true that with Mercury retrograde in your 10th house, you could apply for some jobs or have some interviews or a discussion with a boss, or say a funding agency where things don't actually go forward as you hope, and that could be bitterly disappointing. But I think just take that on the chin, because actually Mercury forges a brilliant link to Jupiter in your second house of resources. So there's, I think, on balance, much more opportunity, providing you can marshal your impatience. So the energy of Libra is about finding a chord. So if you can have collaborative relationships at work, but you feel that you get the recognition that you really deserve, that will absolutely be perfect for you. And with Venus forging a beautiful link to Pluto in your sign, it could be one friend who can continue to get closer and more meaningful for you. And there could be a romantic dimension to this. Which brings us to the Sun or the Ascendant forecast for Aquarius. Now, Aquarius, for you, big pack of energy in your 9th house. You just got to get away from it all, basically. And of course, if you're in a part of the world where COVID lockdown rules are much stricter, that's easier said than done. But if it's possible for you to change things up, be more spontaneous, be more independent minded, and do something more physically challenging, it will be like a breath of fresh air. So if you are someone who has been, like lots of us, largely cocooned inside, I think the next month is the perfect time to head off somewhere you know, whether it's on a longer term journey or on a vacation or on some kind of outward bound course, or maybe a training course. Yes, Mercury is retrograde. Yes, there can be some niggles with tickets, the planning, last minute changes, all that kind of stuff. That's just par for the course, I'm afraid. But with Jupiter in your sign forging a brilliant link to Mercury, focus on the positives. Venus is right at the top of your chart in a really good way. All the hard work you've been doing behind the scenes is coming together. You're feeling much less inhibited at this phase of the year. Saturn and Uranus being in that right angle since really the 6th, I think, of January 2021 has been really, really tough for Aquarius people. But I think now there is a sense of just feeling more like whoopee woo, you know, just go for it. Have some moments of absolute freedom. And, you know, whether your thing is to strip all your clothes off and run into the water at the beach because it's madly daring, or to go up in a hot air balloon, or to jet off to a big city and, you know, check out some cultural or philosophical artifacts or museums and that kind of stuff. The 9th house very much to do with the mind, remember. But I think because Mars is in there, you need to challenge yourself somewhat. But the truth is always important to Aquarius people. Of course, we all have a different version of the truth, but having Mars there means that if you need to stand up for yourself towards someone who's not being very fair, they're in for quite a battle. You will win. Which brings us to Pisces. Last but definitely not least, for the Sun and the Ascendant. So that big set of energy for you is the 8th house, all about transformation. With the retreating Mercury in your 8th house, the key there, of course, is if you are talking about financial issues, in its square to Pluto, you can't afford to be too idealistic. The 8th house having Mars there, however, is very potentially passionate. So if you're someone who really yearns for a greater intimacy, a greater closeness, you know, if you are or have survived COVID largely on your own, you know, you might really, really be wanting a greater contact. Then again, that may be the least thing that you want, but you may want some kind of spiritual challenge that you go through that in some way helps you to evolve. You know, it could be going away on some kind of personal development weekend. It could be pushing yourself to really contemplate some of life's major strands, you know, like life and death. Thinking about these things very, very deeply can be quite challenging, but it may be something you find yourself grappling with over the next month. Uranus in your 3rd house, that's siblings, neighbours, all that kind of good stuff, and that collection of energy in the 8th can be about long-term finance. So, you know, if you're feeling a bit impatient about how things are recovering for you financially from COVID, you could be a bit more sort of on edge, but that edge can make you do something about it, can give you extra grit to push forwards, show a bit more devilment. That can be really, really good. And of course, Venus, the planet of love and affection, is in your 9th house, your sister water sign of Scorpio, in a wonderful link to Pluto. So if the truth of one particular friendship gets clarified, I think it's going to bring a real sense of peace to you. And remember, that big pack of energy suggests some massive transformations lie in wait for you over the next month. And because Mars is in the mix, it's kind of all going to be a little bit more extreme, I feel. But it will, even if at times feel a little bit, you know, whoa, you know, it actually can be exhilarating to go through this, especially if you have, as I said, been locked away and not really been able to make things happen in your life. So I think your impatience to make things happen either around a close relationship, a financial matter, or some kind of personal development at a very core level within you is going to be immensely strong. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure being with you. Please stay safe and goodbye.